January 3, 2026. U.S. forces detain Venezuela's president. Operation Absolute Resolve. He is transferred to the United States to face federal charges. This is not an isolated incident. It is a signal. Nicolas Maduro appears before a federal judge in Manhattan. International reactions follow within hours. Russia condemns the action. China rejects its legality. Others remain silent. The legal debate begins immediately. The strategic implications begin even faster. Washington invokes historical doctrine, not as rhetoric, but as justification. You are living through something historians will debate for decades, not because of this single operation, but because of what it reveals. The signs are visible if you know where to look. Active conflict in Eastern Europe, draining resources and testing alliances. Strategic competition between the United States, China, and Russia across trade, technology, and military domains. Sanctions and counter-sanctions, restructuring financial flows. Economic pressure increasingly replacing open confrontation. Arctic shipping routes becoming contested. Technology supply chains weaponized. Currency systems fragmenting. Discussions that were diplomatically unthinkable 5 years ago, now happening in press conferences. This follows a pattern. When historians examine the transition of major powers, they find a sequence. Not identical each time, but recognizable. Britain between 1900 and 1914. The Soviet Union between 1980 and 1991. The Ottoman Empire in the decades before World War I. Each moved through the same progression. You are watching it again. Stage 1 is overextension. A major power reaches maximum influence. Territory, alliances, strategic commitments. The system appears stable because it has operated that way for decades. The commitments feel permanent. They accumulate. Britain in 1900 controlled 25% of global land area and 23% of global population, naval bases on 6 continents, defense obligations in India, Egypt, South Africa, Australia, Canada. Each commitment made sense individually. Together, they required resources Britain could not sustain indefinitely. India alone required 70,000 British troops. Egypt required financial supervision and military presence. The naval race with Germany required continuous shipbuilding. The cost of maintaining order began to exceed the economic benefit of that order. Not immediately. Gradually. By 1900, Britain's share of global manufacturing had fallen from 23% in 1870 to 18%. Industrial output was growing, but competitors expanded faster. Revenue was rising. Commitments were rising faster. Overextension does not announce itself with crisis. It presents as normal operation. The vulnerability exists long before it becomes visible. Stage 2 is financial strain. The power remains dominant, militarily strong, diplomatically influential. But the gap between expenditure and revenue narrows. Britain's defense spending rose from 2.5% of GDP in 1870 to over 6% by 1913. Dreadnought-class battleships cost £1.8 million each. By 1912, the super dreadnoughts cost $2.5 million. The Navy alone consumed 23% of government spending. Colonial administration added further cost. Returns declined. Maintenance costs rose. This was visible in the budget, not in public perception. The Soviet Union in the 1980s followed the same mechanism. Military spending consumed 15 to 20% of GDP. Cuba received $4 to $6 billion per year in support. The Afghanistan occupation reached 8 billion rubles annually. Revenue could not keep pace, not because of sudden crisis, because the accumulated commitments made during earlier strength exceeded sustainable capacity. When oil prices fell from $35 per barrel in 1980 to $12 by 1986, the gap became impossible to conceal. Financial strain does not cause immediate collapse. It creates vulnerability. It forces choices. Stage 3 is strategic competition. A rival emerges, not necessarily stronger overall, but strong enough in specific domains to challenge where it matters. Germany after 1890 could not match Britain's global navy. Britain had 29 battleships in 1900. Germany had 14. But Germany could build a fleet large enough to threaten Britain's North Sea dominance. That threat mattered more than global parity. Britain was forced to concentrate resources in European waters. Ships were withdrawn from the Mediterranean. Presence in the Pacific was reduced. Concentration requires withdrawal elsewhere. Strategic competition forces choice. Defend everything and weaken everywhere, or prioritize and concede ground. Both choices carry cost. China after 2010 could not match U.S. global military reach. The United States maintained 11 aircraft carrier strike groups, bases in Europe, Asia, the Middle East. But China could build regional capability in the Western Pacific. Anti-ship ballistic missiles, layered air defense systems. By 2020, China operated more than 300 warships compared to the U.S. Navy's 290. This did not remove American power. It constrained where that power could be applied. Every dollar spent on Pacific presence is a dollar not spent elsewhere. Strategic competition does not require global victory. It only requires imposing costs. The dominant power cannot absorb everywhere at once. Stage 4 is resource competition. As financial strain grows and rivals strengthen, access to critical resources becomes contested. Not a single resource. Multiple pressures at the same time. Britain in 1900 controlled coal reserves, iron deposits, shipping routes, and global port access. Its rivals depended on these. Germany needed coal for industry, oil for a modern navy, trade routes for expansion. Competition intensified around choke points. Suez controlled access to Asia. Gibraltar controlled entry to the Mediterranean. The Dardanelles controlled access to the Black Sea. Control of routes meant control of trade, military movement, and economic access, until rivals developed the ability to contest that control. The Soviet Union in the 1980s needed hard currency from oil exports, technology imports for modernization, grain imports to feed its population. The United States and its allies controlled financial infrastructure, technology markets, and agricultural exports. Resource competition was not only physical, it was financial, technological, geographic. When oil prices collapsed, Soviet hard currency revenues fell with them. Technology embargoes slowed modernization. Today, the pattern repeats in different forms. Rare earth minerals, semiconductor manufacturing capacity, Arctic shipping routes, energy corridors through Central Asia, lithium for batteries, undersea cables carrying global communications. Each competition is manageable on its own. Together, they compound strain and force prioritization. Secure the Arctic or secure the South China Sea. Invest in semiconductor independence or maintain military readiness. Every choice requires resources. Every choice excludes another. Stage 5 is economic weaponization. Direct military conflict becomes too costly. The risks outweigh the gains. Powers turn to economic instruments. Sanctions, trade restrictions, currency pressure, debt leverage, payment systems, technology exports. Britain used financial access as leverage. The City of London was the world's financial center. Capital for railroads and industrial development flowed through London. This created power, not military power. Financial leverage, alignment with British interests meant access to credit on favorable terms. Defiance made capital expensive or unavailable. The mechanism worked until alternatives emerged. Germany developed domestic finance. The United States expanded its capital markets. British financial influence diluted as substitutes appeared. The United States after 1945 followed the same logic. Dollar dominance, the Bretton Woods system, energy trade priced in dollars, international debt denominated in dollars. This created structural advantage, access to dollar clearing, control of payment messaging, sanctions excluding countries from dollar-based trade. The instrument was effective, but it reshaped incentives. Russia and China developed currency swap agreements. Regional payment systems formed. Central banks diversified reserves. Trade shifted toward non-dollar settlement. Economic weaponization does not end competition. It accelerates adaptation. Every sanction incentivizes independence. Every restriction creates demand for alternatives. The tool remains powerful, but repeated use erodes its own base. Stage 6 is alliance fragmentation. Traditional alliances weaken. New alignments form. Old assumptions fade. Britain in 1900 relied on balance of power diplomacy, no permanent European alliances. This worked while Britain faced no peer rival. It failed once Germany emerged. By 1904, Britain signed the Entente Cordiale with France. By 1907, agreements followed with Russia. Diplomatic flexibility gave way to rigid alignment. When Austria-Hungary mobilized against Serbia in 1914, the alliance system activated automatically. Russia mobilized for Serbia. Germany mobilized for Austria-Hungary. France mobilized for Russia. Flexibility was gone. The Soviet Union relied on Warsaw Pact cohesion and client-state compliance. The alliances appeared solid. They were conditional. They held during Soviet strength. When financial capacity weakened, loyalty shifted. Poland negotiated with solidarity. Hungary opened its borders. East Germany lost control of population movement. The alliances fractured once maintenance costs exceeded returns. Today, the pattern repeats in different forms. Traditional alliances face pressure. NATO strained by divergent threat assessments. Gulf partnerships reshaped by energy transitions. Asian alliances adjusting to Chinese economic integration. New groupings form around specific interests. BRICS expansion. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Regional security arrangements. Bilateral agreements bypassing established frameworks. This is not unusual. It is stage 6. Alliance fragmentation does not mean war. It means alignment becomes conditional. It means partners hedge. Stage 7 is acceleration. Decision timelines compress. Events begin to outpace institutional response. Britain in 1911 faced the Agadir crisis. What would have been a negotiable colonial dispute in 1880 became a near-war crisis within weeks. France and Germany nearly went to war over Morocco. The issue was not the dispute, it was the speed. The Soviet Union in 1989 watched its Eastern European empire unravel in months, not years. Months. June. Poland holds partially free elections. August. Solidarity forms a coalition government. September. Hungary opens its borders. November. The Berlin Wall falls. December. Regime change in Czechoslovakia and Romania. 6 months from stability to systemic failure. Not because of coordinated design, because feedback loops had overtaken decision-making capacity. Today, acceleration appears across multiple domains. Military buildups measured in months. Sanctions packages designed and implemented in days. Strategic shifts announced publicly without extended preparatory phases. Not because decision-makers are reckless, because institutional reaction time no longer matches system velocity. Acceleration is visible in how quickly previously unthinkable scenarios enter formal discussion. Direct confrontation between major powers. Use of strategic geography as constraint and pressure point. Reconfiguration of global trade systems. These were theoretical 5 years ago. They are operational considerations now. This is the 7-stage pattern: overextension, financial strain, strategic competition, resource competition, economic weaponization, alliance fragmentation, acceleration. Britain moved through all 7 stages between 1900 and 1914. The Soviet Union between 1980 and 1991. The pattern does not forecast events, it reveals structure. Stable systems do not fail from a single shock. They weaken as pressure accumulates across multiple domains at the same time. You are watching the pattern again. Not in one country, not in one region, in the system itself. Conflict in Eastern Europe is not the pattern. It is a signal. The pattern is repeating. What remains unknown is what happens when it no longer applies to a single power, but to the system as a whole.